As adorable as it is to see photos of pets for adoption or even purchased from various sources, Mellow Cat, are you thinking the same thing that I'm thinking?
Every time we hear people adopting, buying, or fostering animals, we really don't think about where they come from because a lot of times we just see the cute pictures on the internet, people pass through us on WhatsApp, on Facebook. We don't really think about what happens in the background. It should be all proper, right? But then I guess
Yeah.
the real answer is no. So today we have Dr. Fiona Woodhouse with us. She's the Deputy Director of SPCA's Welfare Department, and she is going to share with us something about what happens in the background and some of the things to think about before taking an animal on board.
No problem. We all love animals in Hong Kong, and people are more and more interested in animals. They connect more with animals. But quite often, what we forget is our individual choices can make a big difference to the impact of animal welfare. Maybe not to the animal that's directly in front of us, but maybe to another animal involved in the production chain. This is a discussion about how our choices can actually impact the welfare of animals and how we should try to make the most pet friendly choices we can when we're looking to take on a companion animal. Let's first of all have a look at pet keeping and the sources in Hong Kong. So this is some of the survey, again, that the Census and Statistics Department has done. They haven't done a survey on other types of animals other than dogs and cats since 2005. But again, we can see the big change is actually we are getting more and more cats in Hong Kong. So cat ownership is becoming more popular. Cat videos on Instagram and social media, very popular. Cats look cute. Less restrictions in our social housing system. So again, everything is pushing us towards having more cats as pets. And that's a global phenomenon as well. And we're seeing that more and more houses are also owning more than one cat as well. Let's look at where we got their animals from. Still a very high number of dogs and cats are coming from pet shops or being given as gifts. And if you're giving a cat as a gift, you probably got it from a pet shop. Quite a number are being bred at home, but luckily that more and more people are actually considering adoption as a source for getting their animals as well. So this is looking at the general source of animals. So where do they come from? We've got local supply and we've got legal import, and then we've got illegal import. And again, your local supply may end up with animals being abandoned or being allowed to roam around free, or they may be from a local breeder. They may be sold directly to a customer or going to the pet shop. If it's legal import, they may be imported by somebody who's owned them before as they emigrate or immigrate. And so they're just a reunification, or they may actually be purchased from overseas and shipped and go directly to a customer, or they could be shipped into a pet shop. And then, unfortunately, we have the illegal import and smuggling as well. And those can go into non-licensed premises or potentially online in terms of the source. So let's have a look at breeding as a source of obtaining. So what the issue is really is that when we are looking at getting an animal, the SPCA advocates for either getting the animal from the place that it's born in or from a reputable adoption organization. So when we say get it from the place that it's born in, that's because you can go to where it's reared, you can check out the welfare, you can check out the environment, you can see if the animals are properly cared for, not just talking about the cute kitten or puppy you want to get, but also the mum, the dad. What is the breeder like? Are they a good breeder? So we really do advocate for being responsible in your sourcing. And the other thing we promote, obviously, is that if there is an unwanted animal, which we try to reduce, that you consider adoption as well, because unwanted animals also need our help to find homes. The issue, if you don't visit a breeder or if you buy from a pet shop, is that you may not be aware of hidden issues behind. So there is no accountability, quite often no traceability, lots of infectious diseases. So basically, we historically have had a big problem in the dog breeding trade, and that led to a big campaign with improvement in the legislation. And our campaign was about boycotting the bad breeder and obviously asking potential owners to do their own due diligence as well. But this is the issue. So if you don't go to the breeder or if you don't go to an adoption agency, if you go to the pet shop, you don't know where the animals come from. So you can't help to monitor the welfare of that animal. This is potentially less of an issue these days with some species because of the tighter regulation of the trade in dogs. But in other species, such as reptiles, cats, etc., it can be a big problem. Unfortunately, a lot of us today like to shop online, and that is a big issue because, again, we are not doing our due diligence. We're not aware of the background to these animals, what the situation may be. There's a lot of people who are not only going online in Hong Kong, but also looking overseas and potentially smuggling animals in. And that is a big issue, or being the victims of smuggling as well. So smuggling, unfortunately, is something that's been going on for a while. People over the border in mainland China are quite open about this. You can buy animals on Taobao. You can go to pet shops and pet markets, and they will say that they can easily smuggle the animals in for you within 24 hours. But the issue is we don't know how they're kept. There are no welfare laws in China. There's no protection for these animals. There's very poor healthcare standards, especially in the puppy mills. Infectious diseases are rife. There's no breed planning. You're liable to get poor physical specimens bred from because people are just interested in generating money and science and making money off the animals as well. This was a big issue during COVID. We saw quite a few mass smuggling events. Historically, they would be coming across the border in vehicles through the various checkpoints, hidden amongst other sorts of cargo. But during COVID, we saw a lot more smuggling cases with large numbers of animals smuggled alongside other goods, both into Hong Kong, but also outward to be reunited with their owners. And the picture on the right of the screen is what we would see. So you can see there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 crates there, but probably there'll be maybe 30 to 50 animals in those 10 crates. So they will double deck. So in the picture on the right, there's a small kitten below and a pug puppy above. Wow. And these animals, we don't know where they come from. They're all mixed together. Animals from different sources mixed together. So again, it is a real biosecurity issue and a health risk for these animals. People also think about importing and, okay, I don't like Hong Kong's bad and smuggling from China, there's welfare issues. So let me look overseas to source an animal. But again, puppy milling exists around the world. And so this is a picture from Singapore SPCA and Australia, talking about the puppy milling that goes in Australia and the puppies being sent to the pet trade in Singapore. Again, if you are going to source from a reputable breeder overseas, you need to still do your due diligence, still visiting the breeder, still finding out the background. Don't do it over the internet and really think about the animal's welfare. Pet dog breeding in Hong Kong, very commercial, underregulated, very underground historically, poor health and husbandry, poor breeding, and a lot of smuggling. So at one point, it was suggested that up to 2,000 puppies a month were maybe smuggled into Hong Kong to launder through the pet trade. And a lot of those puppies may have diseases, but even if one puppy out of a litter of 4 or 5 survived, then you make significant profit off the back of those poor puppies that were smuggled in. This is an investigation historically showing what you could see. This is a large trade-linked establishment. Interestingly enough, there were no puppies on this premises. These were all adult dogs that we suspected were being used for the trade. This is actually a courty prosecution, not a trading prosecution. And what we think was happening was that this was where the dogs were warehoused when they were pregnant, about to give birth, and they would be moved off-site into a better environment to ensure that maximum number of puppies survived as well. Not all illegal breeding establishments look like this. They can be in a village house. So this again is a village house on the inside where there were several rows of cages of dogs that were being used for breeding as well. So this has significant issues. And this is unfortunately a husky. This is a mother husky that weighed 12 kilos when she was rescued from a unlicensed breeding scenario. And if anybody knows what a husky should look like, this is a bit of a horror story, but this is actually after she was rehabilitated. So unfortunately, the person who was using her wasn't interested in providing proper nutrition or proper health care. They were just interested in maximizing output from the mum. The pet trade in Hong Kong. For a bit of background, historically, there were issues, as I said, with laundering and large numbers of puppies going through the retail spaces in Hong Kong. And back when the government did some research, they found that 74%, and this is around 2010 to 2011, 74% of the dogs traded by pet shops were bred by so-called private pet owners. So there was no oversight of the welfare of those animals. So 74% of the supply for the commercial trade, i.e. the pet shop, was coming from a non-commercial background or so-called non-commercial background because there was no regulation of dog breeding. And that number transfers to over 8,500 dogs in, I think it was a 15-month period. But that's a significant number of dogs coming from a source that there's no oversight of, there's no checks on their welfare. So again, in 2017, after gathering the evidence, they amended the legislation, and now all dog breeding has to be regulated, and all dog trading, you either have to have a license or a permit. So we've managed to crack down on some of the issues with the dog trade. And that also means that anybody who sells an animal that isn't the offspring of their own animal is liable to be prosecuted for illegal trade, even if you ask for an advantage, a box of chocolates or a bottle of wine. So basically, all animal welfare organizations who are rehoming animals should get an exemption issued by AFCD so that they don't have to hold an animal trader license. So that is a measure there to support rehoming and recouping of costs, because obviously a lot of animals are sick, etc., and they need feeding, looking after before they're rehomed. But there are some issues with that approach, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Again, the dog trade, it was very limited. We only had 15 traders who could breed, and now 2022, they've got 34, but that's 34 people who can be inspected and looked at. And whereas before 2017, there were a lot of people who were breeding and couldn't be inspected. And also the fines were pretty paltry. $2,000 was the maximum. And so now the maximum fine can be up to $100,000 for illegal trade or $50,000 for breach of license. And so we're seeing significant increases in the fines, but also the animals can be seized as well and rescued if they've been abused. So it's not just the fine penalty, but maybe the seizure of the offspring and the breeding dogs as well. Interestingly enough, we're talking about dogs and cats a lot, but under Cap 139, which regulates the pet trade, it talks about definition of animals. And we get a very broad pet trade these days. These are some pictures, some from overseas, where people have all sorts of weird animals, hedgehogs in Hong Kong. Slow loris is a big problem with the illegal trade in Indonesia, and even weird and unusual amphibians as well. Interestingly enough, amphibians and fish and insects are not considered animals under the pet trade, but you can obviously buy fish and amphibians in the pet trade, and also more and more exotic animals. So what are the welfare issues related to breeding and trading? We have some issues, which unfortunately is directly caused by us human, and that is without unnatural selections for certain breeds, and not just the breed, but for certain phenotypes. So when I talk about phenotypes, that means the way they actually look. So the physical manifestation of the breed. So if you historically look at different types of dog breeds or cat breeds, you will not see the issues, the physical issues, the deformities that we see today. So Persian cats were developed around after World War II, but they had long coats, the face slightly flat, but normal nose, normal eyes. But these days we have very extreme phenotypes with very small noses, very flat faces. They have extreme issues with breathing problems. Often we're having to do surgeries to try and correct some of their airway deficiencies. They also have inherited diseases and genetic issues and predispositions to developing issues related to heart disease, etc., as they grow older as well. So this is some of the issues that we need people to be aware of. And we need people to think, yeah, that dog looks cute, but really, are we causing that animal or that cat to have a life of long-term suffering? Another thing that's very cute, when you look at them without realizing what's happening, is Scottish fold cats. And there is an international movement to try to ban certain breeding or not registering them. Scottish fold cats, their ears are folded because they have a genetic defect that causes problems with cartilage and joints, and that can cause, again, severe issues and pain for the whole of their lives. So again, these days, there's a lot of campaigning by vets and advocacy groups to try and not breed certain types of animals that are going to have a life of suffering, and to correct some of the unnatural selection we've done for other species as well, or breeds that have caused issues. What about cats? We talked a little about the issues with using cats before, but the focus historically been on the dog trade, but now more and more people are getting cats. There's more and more cats being sold. There's pet shops on every street corner. So we're now facing some of the issues we had with the dogs, the cats, and also other species as well, birds or reptiles, etc. Some of the issues is that there's no breeding regulation of cats, and there's very little oversight of the non-commercial trade. And also at the moment, there's no microchipping required of cats by law. And in many other jurisdictions, they're bringing in microchipping by law of cats, which makes identification and tracing of source a lot better as well, and also can assist with ownership issues. Again, we've got these issues that we've got a lot of poor health, unethical breeding. Cats are very easy to breed from. I don't want to give anybody any ideas, but they're quite quiet. You can keep them quite easily in a house. They can have litters 2, maybe 3 times a year. And those are the things that you can exploit. But what we see is cats being bred repeatedly, that they're poor specimens, that they've got these major issues. There may be increased infectious diseases with coronavirus, feline infectious peritonitis, a very serious and also fatal disease, although there are now treatments for that. And we may also see severe infectious diseases as well. And again, when you're buying these cats through various sources, it's difficult to trace them back. There's no accountability. And also what we're seeing is with the cats, they're actually introducing diseases back into Hong Kong, which then come out into the general cat population. And so when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about feline infectious enteritis, which is a very serious disease and has a high mortality and fatality rate, even with intensive treatment. We used to see this back in the 90s. We used to see cases of that, but now we see a lot of cases of this infectious disease, and almost, I would say, 70 to 80% of the time, these are abandoned pedigreed cats. As I say, what's the issue linked to the trade? So sadly, we do see a lot of sick kittens and sick adults that have been used for the trade that can't be sold or have been sold and then been found to be sick. So somebody doesn't want them, dumped on the street. And there really seems to be linked to irresponsible trade and poor care. And I'd say the inexpensive China sourced puppies and kittens that are more of an issue in terms of biosecurity, then may be mixed with the local trade, and therefore we might get spillover as well. And these are severe issues. And of course, what tends to happen is some cat lover sees an abandoned cat by the side of the street, picks it up, takes it home. They've already got a cat at home. They take it in. They realize it's sick. It's taken the virus into the house, so their cat's at risk. They then take it to an animal welfare organization because they're concerned. But then, of course, the virus gets into the shelter as well. So then that puts the whole population at risk as well. So it is a big issue in terms of how people are dealing with these animals. So what does the illegal trade actually look like? This is a picture from actually was somebody who was keeping a large number of dogs and cats in a flat in Tai Choi. So when you see on the internet and social media, the lovely picture on the left showing you the beautiful cat in fantastic condition with a lovely background, the reality for the mum is actually the situation on the right. Similarly, this is a case that AFCD investigated and prosecuted back in 2011. And they rescued a lot of puppies from illegal trading environments. And after a short while, somebody called up and said, oh, I actually paid a deposit to somebody for a puppy, and I think you might have it. And they forwarded the picture, and the picture that they were being sent was the picture on the left. And we're like, that bears no resemblance. We couldn't even tell you if your puppy is here because nothing looks like your puppy. So it is a real issue when you are buying over the internet or social media. And some people say that social media is one of the biggest crime networks around. So please, please, please do not buy over social media. And this, again, this is the consequences. These are just at the moment, I have an issue about the cats because we do see such an issue, more so at the moment with the cats coming in. So these are just some of the victims of the illegal cat trade and the suffering and the diseases that have come in over the past couple of weeks to SPCA. So you can see that they're pretty horrendous, severe respiratory diseases, cat flu, ulcerated eyes, infectious enteritis virus, even adult cats. So the cat on the right was abandoned while she was actually giving birth, and so had to have a cesarean section. Unfortunately, none of the kittens survived, probably due to the delay in her receiving appropriate treatment. But the issues we see with the adult cats is normally general neglect, quite often chronic diarrhea, cat flu signs, ringworm, things like that as well. So the key message is really adopt, don't shop, and visit the good breeder. Okay. what we want to look at is how can we safeguard animal welfare by our decisions and what supportive actions do we want to take. So do visit people with adoption organizations. Please go and help. There are many hundreds and thousands of dogs, cats, budgies, lizards, snakes, turtles looking for homes in Hong Kong. So please go and adopt, think about adopting, think about helping an animal. And also, as we talked about in the other session, support having a more animal friendly environment so we can have more homes for these animals that are looking for homes as well. Again, we say adopt, go to the shelter. This is a good source of an ethical source of obtaining an animal. However, there are issues linked to animal shelters. There are some facts. So we have many in Hong Kong. And this is not just a Hong Kong issue, it's a global issue. Some may have over 1,000 animals. Quite often there's no disaster planning. So there may not be any planning for eviction, death, flood, or if somebody is the operator or the owner, what about the lease? Who owns the animals? Sometimes the land is questionable. They may have been leased something, but it's not able to be leased or used for that purpose. And there may be some illegal activities like boarding, breeding, trading, or people who don't have the right to work working there to try and help out as well. It is a welfare concern. We don't know how big the issue is, and it's not regulated, and there are no minimum standards. So, in one instance, we're really demanding that the pet trade is regulated, but actually, except for looking at the anti-cruelty legislation, there is no regular inspection of shelters. There's no oversight of shelters as well. And again, we need to focus on the fact that the ideal definition of animal shelter is a temporary place of residence. And we really want to minimize the time of finding them a good permanent home. So is an animal shelter always without welfare issues? So this is, and we have had a few cases where we've had issues with shelters in Hong Kong. And again, this happens around the world. So this is about a case study of a shelter that was called Stray Wonderland. And defendants had been operating shelters for around 10 years. They moved site frequently, tended to avoid any inspection. Our inspectors visited, they knew what to say, like we've got no legal right of entry, etc. They weren't registered as an NGO or a charity. They were taking in animals from various sources, raising funds. There's obviously no oversight. And there were some volunteers who were trying to help, but eventually they were being refused access. And it was actually because of the concerns of the volunteer that eventually the shelter was raided. And you can see that the situation is pretty horrendous. So you can see there's a lot of clutter. The environment is very poor. You can imagine how the animals are suffering in that scenario. When they got in there were 102 dogs that could be identified and 44 cats, and 28 of which were dead dogs and 8 cats were dead. Eventually, the defendant was found guilty and sentenced to 10 months in prison and fined 5,500 for animal-related offences. And they actually damaged somebody's camera, so had to pay compensation for that. So there were 4 offences, 2 under Cat 169, which is the anti-cruelty legislation, 1 under Cat 421, which is the rabies ordinance, and 1 under Cat 200, which I think is criminal damage for the property. As we say, what are the welfare problems with shelters and animal rescue? It's a global issue. In California, there were 14 non-profit animal shelters and rescues prosecuted for mass neglect in 5 years, from 2008 to 2013. And when they were looking at the background of those cases, lack of oversight and safeguards, such as minimum standards and inspections, was cited as one of the main reasons. We're really advocating for some minimum standard and for some oversight of shelters to safeguard the welfare of animals that are kept in the shelter. So shelter legislation is something that is present or being introduced or further developed in many jurisdictions around the world. And the idea is that we don't want to eradicate shelters or animal rescues, but we just want to have that safeguard there to ensure that we protect those animals. That if you look back at the situation with Stray Wonderland, if, for instance, that every animal shelter was subjected to a monthly inspection like a boarding kennel is, then it is very unlikely that the scale of the issue would have got that big in 1 month's time. So this is what we're looking at, trying to ensure that there is good welfare. If you really look at the cases, again, this is talking about a case in Taiwan in 2022. Again, they had a lot of animals kept. They found, I think that's 50 dog bones. I think it's a translation, so probably 50 dead dogs, and they were suffering from skin disease and emaciated. And again, in an animal shelter in Florida, again, there was a prosecution where a lot of dogs and cats were found, and some were extremely sick. So what do we need? We need to have legislation that enhances companion animal protection. So we need to improve the definition of animals under the pet trade legislation or under CAT 139. So we capture those animals that are protected at the moment. We need to regulate new businesses. So what am I talking about there? Things like pet cafes, maybe trainers, etc. And we need to improve cat and other breeding and trade controls. And also we really should look at animal shelter legislation. And also we need to look at animal abandonment and mercy release issues and look at how we allow different types of animals to be imported for the trade. So some animals are not suitable to be kept as pets. They're very difficult to be kept as pets. I'm talking more about exotic species, so in terms of reptiles, etc. And we should really have what we call a positive list. So we should decide which animals are suitable to be kept in captivity, which animals we can easily meet the welfare needs of, and how we go. And also what we need to do is to enhance education. And what we also need to do is continue to educate people to enhance companion animal protection and make people realize that every individual choice can make a difference. A container with some animals in that was thrown overboard during a smuggling exercise, we wouldn't have unwanted sick animals coming in through the pet trade, being discarded on the street. We could hopefully reduce the overpopulation of pets and reduce the shelter populations and stop the unwanted healthy animals staying in the shelters for so long. Mothers would be subjected to repeated breeding, and we wouldn't have the further development of this production chain of animal cruelty in the trade. Again, we should also look at how we're doing responsible breeding, looking at the types of animals, breeds of animals, and looking at the poor breeding practices as well. So there we go. That's a quick summary.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Wow, thanks for prepping me in advance. That was a lot of stories. Actually, it's a wake up call for I think a lot of people, even for me, because as we mentioned before this, even in my neighborhood, there's a lot of places that are unregulated. There's things that people can't do, and there's allegedly even scammers that are using these reasons to scam money in the community. So I really hope we can push forward that we can actually do more in terms of regulating where animals are kept and where they come from in the first place, which makes me think, I think there was a slogan, I forgot from what campaign was it in Hong Kong. It's called Ting Ting, Lama Lam. I think it's from some sort of, it's either theft or it was phone scams. It's when people are panicking, they said you must stop and think first. So I think that kind of summarizes how I feel about everything that you just said in this presentation. Thanks so much, Dr. Fiona.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for
I
that
think it,
sharing.
yeah, I think it is important that people really do stop and think about the individual choices. And I must say that we really need to support the sheltering community, but equally we need to ensure that the sheltering community are able to do the right job to their best ability and not have these issues surrounding some of the grey areas and some of the severe welfare issues that can arise if we don't have proper oversight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again. I'll really look forward to learning more from you. But that's it for this segment. It's a lot, but it'll make me think a lot more in the future when people say they're getting animals from whatnot. And I think I'll probably ask more questions from now on.
Then just
Thank you again.
leave that and not to buy over the internet.
Oh, yeah. It's not even about the buying, even the adopting, because as you said, even like the catteries or the shelters, a lot of them are so called. They're not even regulated, as we saw in the pictures. So I think, yeah, there will be more interrogations in the future. Thank you once again. Yeah, we'll see you soon. Thanks, Dr. Fiona.
Bye. Bye.